Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Spectre here on a Tuesday evening, 15th day of December, about 11 o'clock at night, Central Time here. Thanks for joining, wherever you may be. See a few of you out in chat from across the pond. Glad you can join such early hours in the morning over on your side of the pond. Good to have you. Well, tonight I'm going to cover a few things here that have been gracing my feed. And of course it has a lot to do with the tie-ins between the COVID, the election, and encroaching technocracy and everything else that's been going on. A lot to do with the tie-ins between the COVID, the election, and encroaching technocracy. And of course it helps if I mute myself. Rookie mistake. There we go. Alright, well, like I said, that's what I plan on covering here this evening. And let's see, yep, there we are. We're up on the D-Live side as well. Looks like the fire is cozy. So everybody gather around, get your favorite beverage of choice. Morning, evening, whichever. Coffee, hot cocoa, cider, rum, whatever. Doesn't matter. We got a lot to cover here. The first of which I'm going to hit tonight actually came through yesterday in a couple-part series. It's called Time to Heal Part 1. The Truth Has Been Subjugated. So, this is an article penned by Jim Quinn over at the Burning Platform blog. Burning Platform, well, we have the old fireside tonight. No coincidences. And of course, if I had a nickel for every article I've read over the last, 7, 8, 10 years referencing George Orwell's 1984 or Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, I'd be rich. Dear God. And so yet again, we're going to make reference to a lot of 1984, and you tell me if you see it playing out exactly as things are being laid out in front of us at this specific time in history. Alright, so it says, a letter from Aldous Huxley to George Orwell dating back to 1949 says, whether in actual fact the policy of the boot on the face can go on indefinitely seems doubtful. My own belief is that the ruling oligarchy will find less arduous and wasteful ways of governing and of satisfying its lust for power, and these ways will resemble those which I described in Brave New World. Within the next generation, I believe that the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning and narco-hypnosis are more efficient as instruments of government than clubs and prisons, and that the lust for power can be just as completely satisfied by suggesting people into loving their servitude as by flogging and kicking them into obedience. And again, that was a quip from a letter from Aldous Huxley to George Orwell, dating back to 1949. Huxley's vision of the future held sway for the next 5 decades, as generation after generation underwent government social indoctrination and public schools, medicating those who didn't conform, reduced dissent. Incessant propaganda from government-controlled media convinced the masses to consume, obey, and feel, no thinking aloud, and learn to love their debt servitude. And I guess I'll pause the article there and think back to old Roddy Piper in the movie where he has the old glasses on and obviously takes the glasses off and sees the world around him. Everything is obey and consume, right? That's exactly what we see. So, Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. Try the new drug to lose weight without dieting or exercise. Stay tuned when cold, hard cash. Everything pumped out of the old media center via the towers. Orwell's vision has taken precedence since September 11, 2001. Slowly at first, but rapidly in the last year. A population drowning in cultural irrelevancy, ego-enhancing distractions, and technological gadgetry, making them dumber, are now being corralled and using electronic surveillance, totalitarian dictates by government lackeys, the shredding of the Constitution, intense propaganda, Soviet-style censorship of speech, and Third World-style fraudulent elections to install the deep state-chosen puppet leader. Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. Absolutely. The age of Huxley's Brave New World has degenerated into Orwell's 1984 and Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago. Violence does not always and necessarily lunge straight for your throat. More often than not, it demands of its subjects only that they pledge allegiance to lies, that they participate in falsehood. Quote via Alexander Solzhenitsyn from back in the day. President-select Trojan dementia patient Joe Biden has been attempting to utter the words his handlers put on his teleprompter on the rare occasions when they let him out of the basement. Time to heal, H-E-A-L, has been the slogan his PR flunkies have told him to yammer about regarding their fake plan to reunite the country after surviving 4 years of bad Orange Man. The propaganda machine media gush will praise for all Biden's deep state apparatchik cabinet selections as Biden's handlers attempt to engineer a third Obama term. Yeah, that's exactly what we're headed for, right? More of the same, and I think if anybody is paying a lick of attention, all of his cabinet picks, isn't it just more of the same? Just different handlers instead of Goldman Sachs behind the scenes of what 44 had. Now it's all going to be BlackRock. Pretty much. So that's what we get to look forward to, folks. Continuing on. Says Biden is the clueless, nice guy dupe who mouths words of reconciliation, unity, and healing, while his fabricating financier fascist controllers implement their Great Reset plan in conjunction with their global elite co-conspirators. CNN conducts an interview, quote-unquote, with third-grade level questions designed to comfort the ignorant masses. Not one challenging question about his bagman Hunter, or how he got 80 million votes without campaigning, putting forth his agenda, or leaving his basement. The clown news, CNN, and the rest of the propaganda corporate media are just a division of the Democratic Party, along with Facebook, Twitter, Google, Soros, Bloomberg, CIA, FBI, and the rest of the deep state empire. Our descent into darkness is being built upon the lies of our government, lies of medical experts, lies of the media and journalists paid to perpetuate falsehoods, and a globalist manufactured hysteria over a flu designed to initiate the Great Reset. The majority of Americans are fearfully following the dictatorial mandates of their authoritarian governors and mayors to lock down harder and mask more because science, even though the current surge in cases is happening in states, counties, and cities that have been locked down and masked for months, the lack of independent thought being exhibited by the average American is a sickening display of willful ignorance. Very much so. It is absolutely disturbing that people can't think for themselves, and it's not even so much, in my opinion, that it's the diktats coming from the petty dictators, the little tin pot tyranny that we see from our respective governors and health departments and everything else who think they have the authority, number one. But more importantly, when the bidding is not done by the government, who do they get to do it? The corporations. The very places that we have to rely upon for goods and services. Oh no, Joe Schmo down the street? Oh, your business? I'm sorry. You didn't donate enough to the old Dem Party, so your business is deemed non-essential. But in the meantime, big box store A, B, and C down the street, oh, your pockets run deep. Thank you so much. Carry on. Anyone with an ounce of critical thinking skills can see masks do not stop this virus, but they are a fantastic control mechanism for our masters. They would also realize the case-demic is being driven by a PCR test set at a level to exaggerate positivity, whether you feel sick or not. They would comprehend only 6% of reported COVID deaths are actually from COVID, and not one of their 3 other severe maladies. They would realize over 40% of all deaths have been in nursing homes due to governor negligence, and the average age of COVID death of 82 is higher than the average age of death. The mathematical ignorance of the masses has allowed the authoritarians to keep them cowering and unable to comprehend the truth about this scamdemic. And God, have I talked about that. And of course, how many times have we seen the graphic of the COVID-19 survival rates? 0 to 19 years, 99.997% chance of survival. 20 to 49 years, 99.98% chance of survival. 50 to 69 years, 99.5% chance of survival. And if you're 70 or above, 94.6. And that, folks, is out of cdc.gov. The lies and falsehoods leading up to, during, and in the month since the presidential election have been ratcheted up to a level not thought possible a few years ago. But the ravenous desire of the deep state to rid themselves of Trump forced them to unwittingly reveal their traitorous schemes as they were forced to take drastic, desperate measures in the swing states during the early morning hours of November 4th to steal the election from Donald Trump. And of course, many of us here, if you're stateside, recognize that POTUS had such a landslide going on, it broke the effing algos of Dominion. They couldn't keep up, and they had to do an about face and stop and inject a whole pile of ballots that show up in statistics. Statistically impossible. 100% O Biden, nothing for POTUS in the dark of night, so that when you went to bed the night of Election Day, you woke up the next morning to find, oh, magic happened. Fraction magic. With the unequivocal blind allegiance of their media mouthpieces in the corporate media, the massive fraud which took place in multiple states has been covered up and buried by the Biden cheerleader squad at CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, and now Fox. Of course, the real citizen journalists in the alternate media have been investigating, questioning, and uncovering the coordinated election fraud in key swing state cities where Soros-elected attorney generals, secretaries of states, and district attorneys have conspired with Democrat governors, corporate media outlets, and social media billionaires to steal this election for a basement-dwelling dementia patient. Yep, and it's all being laid bare, every last bit of it. Myself, I'm probably sitting north of about 4,500 articles since Election Day. Probably the next release that I'll put out there for you guys over on Gab. Follow me over there. Probably be north of about 5,000 at that time. So we're documenting history here, folks. Whether they want to accept the true reality or not. When you grasp the implications of a conspiracy of Silicon Valley billionaires, left-wing media outlets, Soros, Bloomberg, Wall Street, shadowy dark money contributors, the leadership of the DOJ, FBI, CIA, and the Democratic Party to rig and steal a presidential election, you realize our country has been captured by a treacherous band of evil quislings. This was not an accidental convergence of happenstances, leading to the election of the dynamic, inspirational leader of the Democrat Party. This was a coordinated conspiracy to override the legitimate votes of Americans by a cadre of diabolical, deviant globalists attempting to implement their communist Great Reset upon an unsuspecting populace cowering in fear from a purposely overhyped flu. They didn't need their senile Manchurian candidate to leave his basement because they had rigged voting machines, implemented a mail-in fraud scheme, censored derogatory info about their candidate's corruption, funneled $1 billion into promoting their gaffe robot and their social media legions and algos to skew searches and put their thumb on the scale to benefit their president-select. Not president-elect, folks, but the president-select. Great is truth, but still greater from a practical point of view is silence about truth. By simply not mentioning certain subjects, totalitarian propagandists have influenced opinion much more effectively than they could have by the most eloquent denunciations. Quote by Aldous Huxley. Huxley really had totalitarian propagandists figured out decades ago. Silence about the truth has proven to be a brilliant strategy when you have control over all the major media outlets and social media run by leftist totalitarian censor police. There is absolutely no doubt Hunter Biden and Jimmy Biden used their relationship to Joe Biden as a means to shake down foreign governments for millions in payoffs in return for influence with the VP of the United States, and the big guy got his slice too. This is all documented in Hunter's emails and the testimony of a business associate to Tucker Carlson. The New York Post presented the facts, but Twitter and Facebook banned their pages. The FBI and DOJ have been investigating Hunter and Jimmy for over a year, but chose to remain silent about their investigations until after the election. Why? When the story broke a couple weeks before the election, it was scorned and ridiculed by the faux journalists, clowns at CNN, MSNBC, NPR, New York Times, WAPO, and every other MSM Democrat propaganda outlet as Russian disinformation. Russia, Russia, Russia has been their catchphrase for the last 4 years of lies and disinformation, so why not again? The traitorous ex-Obama coup conspirators from the FBI, CIA, NSA, and DOJ signed a letter declaring this story false. Every MSM news outlet remains silent about this entirely factual story. Twitter, Facebook, and Google suppressed the story, deleted videos, deplatformed real citizen journalists, and scrubbed the story from their platforms. Millions of voters knew nothing about the Biden crime family and their actual links to China, Russia, and the Ukraine. 4 years of fake news about Russia and Trump collusion had been jammed down our throats, and these very same MSM squawking heads purposefully covered up the truth to get their banal candidate selected. The truth is irrelevant to those who have captured our government, our media, our financial system, our military, our justice system, and the mega corporations who dominate the fabric of our country. We know Google manipulated their search algorithms to favor Democrat left-wing candidates and points of view. We know Twitter shadow bans popular conservative voices while promoting left-wing posts. When a subject matter detrimental to liberals begins to trend, it is shit-canned by Dorsey and his totalitarian censor police. Zuckerberg, who spent millions to get out the vote, left-wing voters only, employs quote-unquote fact-checkers to censor the views of conservatives under the guise of free speech. These Silicon Valley titans of tyranny have mastered the art of suppressing and burying the truth as their means of controlling the ignorant masses. By not reporting the unvarnished factual truth and trumpeting falsehoods, misinformation, and outright lies, these duplicitous billionaires impose their globalist dogma upon an unsuspecting, gullible populace. Suppression of the truth has continued in the weeks after this hostile takeover attempt of the presidency by Biden and his perfidious handlers. The statistically impossible vote tabulations and the Democrat bastions of election fraud in the swing states after voting was abruptly halted in the early morning hours of November 4th. The hundreds of sworn affidavits by poll workers regarding observed fraud, the lack of signature verification on mail-in ballots, proof of dead voters and voters from out-of-state voting, and the disturbing revelations regarding Dominion and Smartmatic ties to China, Venezuela, and Democrat operatives have all been ignored or suppressed by the quote-unquote journalists and the captured MSM and the Silicon Valley despots of censorship. Repeating the phrase, "no evidence of fraud," has been the mantra of the propaganda press, despite enormous evidence of fraud. Huxley's wisdom applies once again. Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. Another quote via Aldous Huxley. This country is currently embroiled in two of the greatest frauds in the history of mankind, and they are intertwined on essential pieces in a globalist reset of the world order. Trump's unwillingness to go along with the globalist agenda of open borders, the Green New Deal, socialism for all, locking down the country to impoverish the masses, and acquiescing to global governance through the Davos crowd who meet at the World Economic Forum, forced the hand of Soros, Gates, Bloomberg, Zuckerberg, Dorsey, Bezos, and the rest of the billionaire leftists to remove him from office at all costs. These people and their minions spent over $1 billion to prop up the weakest candidate in the history of presidential elections, using him as their Trojan dementia patient, awaiting the ascension of their true vassal, Kamala knee pads Harris, to the position where their globalist/communist New World Order can be implemented. The Hunter Biden story is now being flogged by the MSM because they want to remove Biden as quickly as possible after January 20th. Priorities among the elite have shifted. Bye-bye, Basement Joe. They just needed to steal the 2 Georgia Senate seats on January 5th, and they can change the world. That should be a piece of cake after stealing a national election. The follow-the-science fraud being perpetuated upon a woefully ignorant population of sheep is a perfect combination of Charles Mackay's insight that men think in herds and go mad in herds, especially when their overlords use Bernays propaganda techniques to drive them mad. The masses are truly being manipulated and controlled by unelected billionaires wielding the power of technology to misinform and invoke terror, to corral the sheep to do as they are instructed, or they will all die. Whether this virus was accidentally released from the Wuhan biolab, purposely released by someone or some entity with an agenda which would be furthered by a global pandemic, or just nature doing what it does, the globalist billionaire squad were not going to let a crisis go to waste. They have weaponized this virus in a myriad of ways to achieve their objectives of control, wealth, and power. Before the pandemic arrived, Trump was a shoo-in to win in a landslide, as unemployment was 3.5%, the stock market was hitting all-time highs, and the economy was on solid footing. Using a flu as a justification to lock down the country and destroy Trump's economy, while also using it as a pretext to flood the nation with unaccountable mail-in ballots in order to fraudulently stuff the ballot box for a senile stiff, was a gift from the Chinese god of Wuhan. The truth has been subjugated, twisted like a DNA strand, engineered for World Economic Forum agenda purposes, deplatformed by the Silicon Valley censorship police, and transformed into the big lie in order to execute a well-thought-out plan to subjugate the masses. Just as 9/11 was used to justify the implementation of the surveillance state through the pre-written Patriot Act, this COVID-19 pandemic hysteria is being used to justify the Great Reset desired by Klaus Schwab, Gates, Soros, and the rest of the corporatist Davos crowd. Socialism and poverty for the plebes, and untold riches, power, and control for the overlords. They are so confident in their ability to carry out their perfidious plans, they don't even hide it anymore. And of course, Klaus Schwab says you'll own nothing, and you'll be happy about it. In part 2 of this article, I'll make the case for joining the fight now before it is too late to fight. So that was part 1. Now, into part 2 that just came through this evening. Time to heal part 2, or fight. Again, Jim Quinn penned this over at the Burning Platform blog. So in part 1 of this article, I discussed how our country has devolved from Huxley's brave new world of distraction and irrelevancy into Orwell's world of Big Brother surveillance and Solzhenitsyn's Gulag archipelago. Now I'll make the case for joining the fight against the Great Reset. Another quote via Klaus Schwab, the globalist, says, "The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world." As more than half the country sleepwalks into the clutches of Marxism and tyranny, they fail to heed the wisdom of those who experienced the cruelty, oppression, and degradation after a similar revolution in the last century. A revolution never brings prosperity to a nation, but benefits only a few shameless opportunists, while to the country as a whole it heralds countless deaths, widespread impoverishment, and, in the gravest cases, a long-lasting degeneration of the people. That's a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Schumer's slip of the tongue about changing the world and then putting on his mask to push the mask work narrative, and declaring he will change the country when they win the 2 Georgia Senate seats reveals the global nature of this ongoing coup attempt by the global elites and the deep state. I was highly suspicious of the engineered hysteria for this China flu back in March when I wrote P for Pandemic, and stand by my conclusions reached 9 months ago. And I'm going to circle back to that, by the way, at the conclusion of this article, what Mr. Quinn penned back in March, and see if we hit the mark. As this incomprehensible national shutdown extends into April, tens of thousands of small businesses will be forced to close their doors for good. Local restaurants, hair salons, delis, hardware stores, and thousands of other small businesses will be involuntarily shuttered for good. The national chains will collect their government largesse, produce PR campaigns to pat themselves on the back, and abscond with the profits of the now deceased small businesses. The corporate fascists will become ever more powerful. Why are we letting this happen? I'm infuriated every time I see an Applebee's, Walmart, or Amazon commercial touting their bravery and fortitude during these troubled times. These mega corporations with powerful lobbying departments and unlimited financial resources have reaped tremendous profits and seen their stock prices soar to all-time highs, while hundreds of thousands of small restaurants and retailers have closed for good. somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of all small businesses in America have closed or will close permanently. The bullshit slogan, "We are all in this together," has been beaten to death by the propaganda media, while our wealthy elite overlords work remotely in their multi-million-dollar mansions doing their daily Peloton workouts, sending their kids to expensive private schools and dining on white truffles and caviar at the French Laundry for $1,200. We are not in this together. It's us and them, and you know who they are. The millions of formerly middle class and poor are lining up at food banks because authoritarian governors like Newsom, Cuomo, Whitmer, Murphy, and Wolf have shut down small businesses without any science to back up their dictatorial actions, while allowing Walmart, Costco, Lowe's, and other favored companies to remain open. Political donations appreciated. And yes, Bereka, there is time to ask questions at the end, of course. As the months of idiotic government tyranny have gotten worse, I couldn't help but experience an Inspector Finch moment while pondering the confluence of events surrounding this pandemic/plandemic/scamdemic. I felt like I could see everything that happened and everything that is going to happen. It was like a perfect pattern laid out in front of me, and I realized we're all part of it, and all trapped by it. And that's a quote from Finch from V for Vendetta. The purposeful destruction of the US and EU economies through unnecessary, unwarranted, and unconstitutional lockdowns of citizens and small businesses, mandatory masking for a virus that can easily penetrate a mask, with a survival rate of 99.5% for those under 70 years old, using the virus to steal a presidential election through mail-in ballot fraud, social media manipulation, and Dominion software vote switching, and now the rollout of a vaccine in 9 months that is supposedly 95% effective, when the regular flu vaccine is only 40% effective after decades of study, and no one has a clue regarding any long-term consequences of the vaccine, is all part of the plan. We also know the drug companies have legal immunity from whatever terrible side effects might arise. Whenever confronted with a confusing sequence of events and baffling governmental measures, it is always a safe bet to just follow the money. Leftist ideology is only a means for evildoers to justify the destruction of our society. Ideology, that is what gives evil doing its long-sought justification and gives the evildoer the necessary steadfastness and determination. Yet another quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. If you drive 50% of small businesses into insolvency, all those sales and profits must gravitate to the connected mega corporations, as we have already seen. They then pay off politicians to enforce regulations and mandates to keep the profits flowing and small businesses from competing. By stealing the presidential election and accomplishing the same result in the Georgia Senate races, the Marxist-loving global elite will change the world. Right, Schumer? By packing the Supreme Court with 4 leftists, abolishing the filibuster rule, and making Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico states, the coup will be complete. America as we know it will cease to exist, and those not connected to the oligarchs will sink into impoverishment and slavehood status. The oligarchs will reap the riches, while they retain control through an iron fist and sophisticated technological surveillance. The miraculous Gates/Fauci COVID vaccine, which is currently being marketed by the MSM talking heads, will become mandatory to work, travel, shop, or enter sports venues. Big Pharma is already reaping billions in profits while being shielded from liability when it goes wrong, as designed. By acquiescing to the demands of these evil totalitarians, we are sentencing future generations to a digital gulag, with the threat of a real gulag for dissenters. And keeping silent about evil, and burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it, and it will rise up 1,000-fold in the future. When we neither punish nor reproach evildoers, we are not simply protecting their trivial old age, we are thereby ripping the foundations of justice from beneath new generations. Yet another quote via Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Big Brother is home. He is installed in the item you just dragged home from the Apple Store. And that's a quote from Julian Assange. Even though all quote-unquote scientific studies prior to the pandemic by the CDC, the World Health Organization, prestigious universities, the New England Journal of Medicine, and the recently published Danish mask study all concluded masks do not protect anyone from viruses. Our totalitarian overlords saw the opportunity to impose their will upon the masses as a test to see how far they could go before meeting resistance. Fauci, the Surgeon General, and the head of the CDC weren't lying in March when they all told the public masks didn't protect them. They have been lying since then. The scientific proof can be easily observed by looking at a chart of cases in states with mandatory masking. The cases have skyrocketed due to the purposely faulty PCR test, despite mask mandates and lockdowns. I guess the manufacturers of these masks are telling the truth. And of course, right on the side of an N95 mask, warning. This product is an ear loop mask. This product is not a respirator and will not provide any protection against COVID-19 or other viruses or contaminants. Right on the side of the box. But mask away, everybody. The masks have not been about health. They've been about control and conditioning the population for further restrictions of liberties and rights in the name of safety and security. Knowing the ignorance and lack of critical thinking skills of at least half the population, those in control of the pandemic narrative are weaponizing that ignorance to invoke fear and loathing among the pliable populace. By dehumanizing us as nothing more than germ-carrying super spreaders, their plan is to drastically reduce interaction by like-minded people who might resist and create suspicion and distrust among neighbors and families. And it is working beyond their wildest expectations, as a nation of Karens are on the lookout, reporting non-compliance to the authorities. Big Brother now wears a mask, along with recording every electronic communication you make and tracking your every movement. This isn't Orwellian fiction. It's a modern-day version of Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago. Always eyes watching you and the voice enveloping you. Asleep or awake, indoors or out of doors, in the bath or bed. No escape. Nothing was your own except a few cubic centimeters in your skull. That's a quote out of George Orwell's 1984. A network of informants saturated the population. Secrecy and distrust permeated the people, so much so that any overt activity was perceived as a provocation. How many denunciations there were against one's own close relatives or against friends who had fallen under the sword. And that's a quote via Alexander Solzhenitsyn again. Our world is descending into darkness, but it is not the dark winter narrative being spewed by the vacuous bimbo faux journalists on the boob tube at the behest of their corporate chieftains. The ramping up of fear using fraudulent statistics, while withholding the truth regarding the minuscule danger to healthy people under the age of 70, is essential for the global elite to successfully achieve the Great Reset, where you will own nothing and be happy. For decades, they have been slowly chipping away at the foundations of our society: family, faith, personal responsibility, honesty, hard work, community, standards, goodwill towards your fellow man, the freedom to make your own choices, and adherence to agreed-upon societal rules. Today, we have drag queen story hour at the library for 5-year-olds, Epstein and his cadre of rich celebrity elites practicing pedophilia, and men pretending to be women as health experts and women athletes. Now they are ready for the final destruction of our foundational values. You will eat bugs and fake meat to preserve the planet. You will be denied fossil fuels for the planet. You will be provided just enough digital currency to survive. You will do menial jobs and be thankful to your overlords. You will dutifully take your vaccination boosters without question, or face the gulag. You will gladly agree to being chipped and electronically monitored. You will only consume government messaging and will not be allowed to contemplate contrary views. You will no longer hide behind the safety of the U.S. Constitution, as a new world order supplants that outdated scrap of parchment. They want billions of obedient automations with the same face and thoughts, adhering to their mandates and proclamations. Once these Marxists seize power of our government, they will never relinquish it. This battle is for all the marbles. If we lose, we will be subjugated and punished. Orwell understood the mindset of totalitarians. We know that no one ever seizes power with the intention of relinquishing it. Power is not a means, it is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes a revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. Now you begin to understand me. Again, George Orwell, 1984. It is time to fight, not time to heal. The enemy and their tactics have been laid bare to all who choose to acknowledge reality and realize a battle for the soul of our civilization is underway. Being trapped in a normalcy bias bubble is not a viable strategy. You can't sit out a fourth turning. This fourth turning has followed the expected path, as the initial financial crisis has now entered the violent upheaval stage, where the future of our country hangs in the balance. Trump's team seems to have exhausted all legal means to reverse this travesty of an election. The deep state is powerful and ingrained at all levels of the government bureaucracy. Hoping for the cavalry to arrive in the nick of time to save the day is naive and dangerous wishful thinking. The future will be determined by individual acts of bravery and courage. Setting an example for others by courageously speaking the truth and standing up to those intent on enslaving us through lies in their Great Reset dystopian future is how this war will be won. The simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. One word of truth outweighs the world. Another quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. If you think we have time to fight at a future date, you are badly mistaken. As we have seen during the 4-year attempted coup against a non-cooperative president and this stolen election, these Marxist globalists will resort to anything to prevail. And once they gain complete control, they will not relinquish their power. that is when retribution against Trump supporters will commence. If we do not take this fight to these evildoers now, we will burn in the camps later. Heal or fight. The time has arrived. And how we burn in the camps later, thinking, what would things have been like if every security operative, when he went out at night to make an arrest, had been uncertain whether he would return alive and had to say goodbye to his family? Or if, during periods of mass arrests, as for example in Leningrad, when they arrested a quarter of the entire city, people had not simply sat there in their lairs, paling with terror at every bang of the downstairs door and at every step on the staircase, but had understood they had nothing left to lose, and had boldly set up in the downstairs hall an ambush of a half-dozen people with axes, hammers, pokers, or whatever else was at hand. The organs would very quickly have suffered a shortage of officers and transport, and, notwithstanding all of Stalin's thirst, the cursed machine would have ground to a halt, if we didn't love freedom enough. And even more, we had no awareness of the real situation. We purely and simply deserved everything that happened afterward. Another quote, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The corrupt establishment will do anything to suppress sites like the burning platform from revealing the truth. The corporate media does this by demonetizing sites like mine by blackballing the site from advertising revenue. And if you get value from this site, please keep it running with a donation. So far tonight, that thing has got about 45,000 views. And of course, I just read that to you. Parts 1 and 2. So yes, folks, the time is at hand. Dig in and fight in any way that you know how. Spread the information around social media, whatever you got to do. Awaken your friends and family to the BS narrative that is being pushed, that they are being played at every level since the beginning. And to carry on that tune, like I said, I was going to circle back to his article from earlier this year, P for Pandemic, The Populist Rage. I'm not going to read the whole article, but I am going to jump down to some key points in that Jim Quinn made back then. I'll start off with the quote here. Actually, I'll back up one paragraph from that. It says, the party is attempting to turn us against each other so we don't turn on them. The truth is they are losing control. This debt-drenched Ponzi financial system is collapsing and they have no way to escape the consequences of their crimes. The party is in a weakened position and is lashing out in order to retain power. I feel like Finch in the scene which triggers the people to throw off their chains and fight back. I felt like I could see everything that happened and everything that is going to happen. It was like a perfect pattern and laid out in front of me, and I realized we're all part of it and all trapped by it. The very same quote that he referenced in the articles we just read in V for Vendetta. It says, here's what I see happening now and what could happen if we knuckle under to the authoritarians. And again, this dating back to end of March now. So what is happening now? The global economy will sink into a depression with second quarter GDP at negative 20% and unemployment rising to 20%. Check. I think we hit that mark. Despite violent upswings, the stock market will drop another 30% in the next few months. That I don't know that it did to that degree, but we have rebounded to some degree. The annual deficit will top $4 trillion as the $2.2 trillion of pork hits the spending side and tax revenue evaporates due to the country being closed for business. And of course, we see more and more of the same of lockdowns and business closures. The unaccountable Fed will double its balance sheet to $9 trillion, up from $800 billion in 2008, as they pump the fiat directly into the veins of the Wall Street addicts. The number of cases and deaths will continue to rise, but be no worse than the swine flu numbers and far less than the Spanish flu figures. Left-wing authoritarian governors will declare even more draconian lockdowns of their citizens, enforced by their police forces and National Guard troops. The initial fear and panic buying at the grocery stores has subsided, but once the media begins to tout supply chain disruptions, a renewed panic will cause chaos across the country. Police will monitor the license plates of those from infected areas, demanding the drivers' papers and forcing them to return to their states. Silicon Valley's Big Brother will report the movements of all citizens to the government through cell phone tracking of individuals. Citizens will be encouraged by Big Brother to monitor the actions of their neighbors and report them to the authorities if they dare to disregard an order from their government keepers. The media will continue to hype and create panic by exaggerating every aspect of this health crisis and cheer on every edict handed by government authorities. As the lockdown nears a month, the natives will grow increasingly restless as their $1,200 evaporates and they begin to question the party's narrative. The vile politicians in D.C. will roll out another stimulus scheme, further indebting future generations in a pathetic attempt to prop up this carcass of a country. Rioting and looting in the urban areas will lead to martial law being declared by Trump and the governors. The legitimate scapegoating of China for creating this crisis will lead to increased tensions as domestic discontent in both countries creates an atmosphere where military escapades are utilized to distract the masses, using patriotism as a rallying cry by the failing leaders. Well, not all of that came to pass necessarily, but a good portion. And what could happen? So a little bit of projection here on his thoughts. Says the authorities will declare all coin and currency as unsafe due to the virus and force the digitalization of the entire country. Gold will be outlawed once again as its price rise will reveal the currency debasement and inflation created by the Fed's monetary machinations. Either at the convention or just before, Biden will voluntarily step aside due to his progressing Alzheimer's to allow the media's hero governor of New York to assume the nomination of the Democrat Party. Again, reminding you folks that this article was penned back in March of this year. With the economy in depression and the stock market down 50%, Trump would lose the presidency to Cuomo, and the Democrats would take full control of Congress. The left-wing fascist party would then begin implementing a government-controlled healthcare regime where all Americans will need to be microchipped for our own good. Miraculously, a vaccine to eliminate the threat of coronavirus will be discovered, and all Americans will be forced to receive it under threat of arrest. Shockingly, key congressmen will have invested heavily in the company that developed the cure. The lunatic fringe will achieve their aim of a Green New Deal, passing legislation which will put the final nail in the coffin of a once great republic. The economy will spiral downward and the stock market will crash to levels not seen since the mid-1990s. As the global depression deepens, the one world government globalists will again utilize the fear and panic of the masses to try and install a global solution by offering financial relief, a debt jubilee, in return for relinquishing our rights, liberties, and freedom to a world run by billionaire oligarchs. And last but not least, the authoritarians will pass legislation banning guns and demanding citizens to hand over their firearms under threat of imprisonment. The instantaneous blowback will rock the world. And that was just some of the conclusions / predictions and that he penned again here some 6-8 months ago back in March. Oh, so yes, you guys had questions. Now would be the time to entertain those. Yes, of course. Let's see the Michigan Senator's question of Dominion creator today. I did not happen to catch that. I will cycle through the articles probably at the conclusion here tonight, as I've been doing daily since Election Day. Probably pulling in anywhere from 100 to 200 articles a day. So, yeah. on it. All sorts of stuff being revealed. I don't know that at this point how many more hearings we necessarily need to have. I think the evidence pretty well speaks for itself at this point. What I find rather interesting is the fact that Smartmatic says tonight that they're going to potentially sue folks over at Fox, the Lou Dobbses, the Maria Bartiromos and company for defamation, likely, for dropping their name in and saying, fraudulent deeds. Ridiculous. Good luck with that, Smartmatic. But just before showtime tonight, there was another article that came through along the same lines. Big Brother in disguise, the rise of a new technological world order. That's out of the Rutherford Institute. John Whitehead over there. Again, referencing George Orwell. You had to live, did live, from habit that became instinct, and the assumption that every sound you made was overheard, and, except in darkness, every movement scrutinized. Yet another quote from George Orwell's 1984. So apparently everybody is on a 1984 kick here for folks that are penning articles. And it happens periodically as we see all this new technology and surveillance state and everything rolled out. We get that. Again, if I had a nickel for every article I had in my archives here that mentioned Huxley or Orwell, I'd probably be rich. Thank you very much. It's not the cure of the Constitution. Why are we fighting this in court based on the Constitution? Brecca asks over on DLive. Well, the problem is this, and it's the very scenario that our founders warned about. If you read through the Federalist Papers, if you read through the Constitution, you know that one of the great fears that our founders had was the judicial system. Our folks that sit on the bench being weaponized against us, meaning rather than interpret the laws as they're supposed to do, that they would indeed legislate from the bench, which is a no-no, and what has been exploited over the years. Just as the articles net that I covered here, you get the Soros types who have installed DAs, who have installed secretaries of state, who have installed judges on the bench around the country to do his bidding. They no longer adjudicate. No. They legislate from the bench. Unwritten laws. No more interpretation. So what this has done is from bottom to top exposed the level of corruption. And of course, if we go back to the early days of Q in 2017, what did we say? The military is the only way forward. We can't rely on our system of justice. We don't have it. We have a just us system. Right? We've seen it exposed at your local election officials, the commissions, your secretaries of state, your lieutenant governors, your secretaries of state, at the state levels of all 50 states who have bought into this through contracts, traveling down to consulates down in Houston, etc., etc. And then continuing up the path, what have we seen? The lawsuits that have credible affidavits cast aside. Ridiculousness. Out of places like, what was it, Wisconsin in recent days? They dismissed because they thought that the suit was racist. What sort of crap is that? And so we see the circuit courts, we see the appeals courts, and potentially all the way up to and including the Supreme Court. The problem is, we are not under common law, as this country was intended. But our justice system has been subverted and implanted with commercial law, or maritime admiralty law. Every crime is commercial. Everything. It's not about justice, righting a wrong. It's about the flow of dollars. Dollars from you to them. It's not what our founders intended. Candace, I don't see you being blocked, so I'm not sure what your issue is. I don't think I see any mods over on the YouTube side and that who have blocked you. No, you're to the good. So that's my take on it. Yes, we got a long ways to go and a short time to get there. By quote Smokey and the Bandit. Throw in a little humor here on the subject matter this evening. Let's see here. So in any case, back to this article. If you guys got more questions, I'll stop. It had the potential for disaster. Early in the morning of Monday, December 15, 2020, Google suffered a major worldwide outage in which all of its internet-connected services crashed, including Nest, Google Calendar, Gmail, Docs, Hangouts, Maps, Meet, and YouTube. The outage only lasted an hour, but it was a chilling reminder of how reliant the world has become on internet-connected technologies to do everything from unlocking doors and turning up the heat to accessing work files, sending emails, and making phone calls. A year earlier, a Google outage resulted in Nest users being unable to access their Nest thermostats, Nest smart locks, and Nest cameras. As Fast Company reports, this essentially meant that because of a cloud storage outage, people were prevented from getting inside their homes, using their AC, and monitoring their babies. Yeah. Welcome to the Matrix. 20-some years after the Wachowskis' iconic film, The Matrix, introduced us to a futuristic world in which humans exist in a computer-simulated non-reality powered by authoritarian machines, a world where the choice between existing in a denial-ridden virtual dream state or facing up to the harsh, difficult realities of life come down to a blue pill or a red pill. We stand at the precipice of a technologically dominated matrix of our own making. We are living the prequel to the Matrix with each passing day, falling further under the spell of technologically driven virtual communities, virtual realities, and virtual conveniences managed by artificially intelligent machines that are on a fast track to replacing human beings and eventually dominating every aspect of our lives. Science fiction has become fact. In The Matrix, computer programmer Thomas Anderson, aka Hacker Neo, is wakened from a virtual slumber by Morpheus, a freedom fighter seeking to liberate humanity from a lifelong hibernation state imposed by hyper-advanced artificial intelligence machines that rely on humans as an organic power source. With their minds plugged into a perfectly crafted virtual reality, few humans ever realize they are living in an artificial dream world. Neo is given a choice to take the red pill, wake up and join the resistance, or take the blue pill, remain asleep, and serve as fodder for the powers that be. Most people opt for the blue pill. In our case, the blue pill, a one-way ticket to a life sentence in an electronic concentration camp, has been honey-coated to hide the bitter aftertaste, sold to us in the name of expediency, and delivered by way of blazingly fast internet, cell phone signals that never drop a call, thermostats that keep us all the perfect temperature without our having to raise a finger, and entertainment that can be simultaneously streamed to our TVs, tablets, and cell phones. Yet, we are not merely in thrall with these technologies that were intended to make our lives easier. We have become enslaved by them. Look around you. Everywhere you turn, people are so addicted to their internet-connected screen devices, smartphones, tablets, computers, televisions, that they can go on for hours at a time submerged in a virtual world where human interaction is filtered through the medium of technology. This is not freedom. This is not even progress. This is technological tyranny, an iron-fisted control delivered by way of the surveillance state, corporate giants such as Google and Facebook, and government spy agencies such as the National Security Agency. So consumed are we with availing ourselves of all the latest technologies that we have spared barely a thought for the ramifications of our heedless, headlong stumble towards a world in which our abject reliance on internet-connected gadgets and gizmos is grooming us for a future in which freedom is an illusion. Yet it's not just freedom that hangs in the balance. Humanity itself is on the line. If ever Americans find themselves in bondage to technological tyrants, we have only ourselves to blame for having forged the chains through our own lassitude, laziness, and abject reliance on internet-connected gadgets and gizmos that render us wholly irrelevant. Indeed, we're fast approaching Philip K. Dick's vision of the future as depicted in the film Minority Report. There, police agencies apprehend criminals before they can commit a crime. Driverless cars populate the highways, and a person's biometrics are constantly scanned and used to track their movements, target them for advertising, and keep them under perpetual surveillance. Cue the dawning of the age of the Internet of Things, in which internet-connected things monitor your home, your health, and your habits in order to keep your pantry stocked, your utilities regulated, and your life under control and relatively worry-free. The key word here, however, is control. In the not-too-distant future, just about every device you have, and even products like chairs that you don't normally expect to see technology in, will be connected and talking to each other. By the end of 2018, there were an estimated 22 billion Internet of Things connected devices in use around the world. Forecasts suggested that by 2030, around 50 billion of these IoT devices will be in use around the world, creating a massive web of interconnected devices spanning everything from smartphones to kitchen appliances. As the technologies powering these devices have become increasingly sophisticated, they have also become increasingly widespread, encompassing everything from toothbrushes and light bulbs to cars, smart meters, and medical equipment. It is estimated that 127 new IoT devices are connected to the web every second. This connected industry has become the next big societal transformation, right up there with the Industrial Revolution, a watershed moment in technology and culture. Between driverless cars, the completely lacking a steering wheel, accelerator, or brake pedal, and smart pills embedded with computer chips, sensors, cameras, and robots, we are poised to outpace the imaginations of science fiction writers such as Philip K. Dick and Isaac Asimov. By the way, there is no such thing as a driverless car. Someone or something will be driving, but it won't be you. These internet-connected techno-gadgets include smart light bulbs that discourage burglars by making your house look occupied, smart thermostats that regulate the temperature of your home based on your activities, and smart doorbells that let you see who is at your front door without leaving the comfort of your couch. Nest, Google's suite of smart home products, has been at the forefront of the connected industry, with such technologically savvy conveniences as a smart lock that tells your thermostat who is home, what temperature they like, and when your home is unoccupied, a home phone service system that interacts with your connected devices to learn when you come and go, and alert you if your kids don't come home, and a sleep system that will monitor when you fall asleep, when you wake up, and keep the house noises and temperature in a sleep-conducive state. The aim of these internet-connected devices, as Nest proclaims, is to make your house a more thoughtful and conscious home. For example, your car can signal ahead when you're on your way home, while hue lights can flash on and off to get your attention if Nest Protect senses something's wrong. Your coffee maker, relying on data from fitness and sleep sensors, will brew a stronger pot of coffee for you if you've had a restless night. Yet given the speed and trajectory at which these technologies are developing, it won't be long before these devices are operating entirely independent of their human creators, which poses a whole new set of worries. As technology expert Nicholas Carr notes, as soon as you allow robots or software programs to act freely in the world, they're going to run up against ethically fraught situations and face hard choices that can't be resolved through statistical models. That will be true of self-driving cars, self-flying drones, and battlefield robots, just as it's already true on a lesser scale with automated vacuum cleaners and lawnmowers. For instance, just as a robotic vacuum Roomba makes no distinction between a dust bunny and an insect, weaponized drones poised to take to the skies en masse this year will be incapable of distinguishing between a fleeing criminal and someone merely jogging down a street. For that matter, how do you defend yourself against a robotic cop, such as the Atlas android being developed by the Pentagon, that has been programmed to respond to any perceived threat with violence? Moreover, it's not just our homes and personal devices that are being reordered and reimagined in this connected age. It's our workplaces, our health systems, our government, our bodies, and our innermost thoughts that are being plugged into a matrix over which we have no real control. Indeed, it is expected that by 2030 we will all experience the Internet of Senses, enabled by artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, 5G, and automation. The Internet of Senses relies on connected technology interacting with our senses of sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch by the way of the brain as a user interface. As journalist Susan Fortin explains, many predict that by 2030 the lines between thinking and doing will blur. 59% of the consumers believe that we will be able to see map routes on VR glasses by simply thinking of our destination. By 2030, technology is set to respond to our thoughts and even share them with others. Using the brain as an interface could mean the end of keyboards, mice, game controllers, and ultimately user interfaces for any digital device. The user needs to only think about the commands, and they will just happen. Smartphones could even function without touchscreens. In other words, the iOS will rely on technology being able to access and act on your thoughts. Fortin outlines several trends related to the iOS that are expected to become a reality by 2030. 1. Thoughts become action. Using the brain as the interface, for example, users will be able to see map routes on VR glasses by simply thinking of a destination. 2. Sounds will become an extension of the devised virtual reality. Users could mimic anyone's voice realistically enough to fool even family members. 3. Real food will become secondary to imagined tastes. A sensory device for your mouth could digitally enhance anything you eat so that any food can taste like your favorite treat. 4. Smells will become a projection of this virtual reality so that virtual visits to forests or the countryside, for instance, would include experiencing all the natural smells of those places. 5. Total touch. Smartphones with screens will convey the shape and texture of the digital icons and buttons they are pressing. 6. Merged reality. VR game worlds will become indistinguishable from physical reality by 2030. Unfortunately, in our race to the future, we have failed to consider what such dependence on technology might mean for our humanity, not to mention our freedoms. Ingestible or implantable chips are a good example of how unprepared we are, morally and otherwise, to navigate this uncharted terrain. Hailed as revolutionary for their ability to access, analyze, and manipulate your body from the inside, These smart pills can remind you to take your medication, search for cancer, and even send an alert to your doctor warning of an impending heart attack. Sure, the technology could save lives, but is that all we need to know? Have we done our due diligence in asking all the questions that need to be asked before unleashing such awesome technology on an unsuspecting populace? For example, asks Washington Post reporter Ariana Njung Cha, what kind of warnings should users receive about the risks of implanting chip technology inside a body, for instance? How will patients be assured that the technology won't be used to compel them to take medications they don't really want to take? Could law enforcement obtain data that would reveal which individuals abuse drugs or sell them on the black market? Could what started as a voluntary experiment be turned into a compulsory government identification program that could erode civil liberties? Let me put it another way. If you were shocked by Edward Snowden's revelations about how NSA agents have used surveillance to spy on Americans' phone calls, emails, and text messages, can you imagine what unscrupulous government agents could do with access to your internet-connected car, home, and medications? Imagine what a SWAT team could do with the ability to access, monitor, and control your internet-connected home, locking you in, turning off the lights, activating alarms, etc. While President Trump signed the Internet of Things Cybersecurity Improvement Act into law on December 4th, 2020, in order to establish a baseline for security protection for the billions of IoT devices flooding homes and businesses, the law does little to protect the American people against corporate and governmental surveillance. In fact, the public response to concerns about government surveillance has amounted to a collective shrug. After all, who cares if the government can track your whereabouts on your GPS-enabled device, so long as it helps you find the fastest route from point A to point B? Who cares if the NSA is listening in on your phone calls and downloading your emails, so long as you can get your phone calls and emails on the go and get lightning-fast internet on the fly? Who cares if the government can monitor your activities in your home by tapping into your internet-connected devices, thermostat, water, lights, so long as you can control those things with the flick of a finger, whether you're across the house or across the country? Control is the key here. As I make clear in my book, Battlefield America, The War on the American People, total control over every aspect of our lives, right down to our inner thoughts, is the objective of any totalitarian regime. George Orwell understood this. Orwell's masterpiece, 1984, portrays a global society of total control in which people are not allowed to have thoughts that in any way disagree with the corporate state. There is no personal freedom, and advanced technology has become the driving force behind a surveillance-driven society. Snitches and cameras are everywhere, and people are subject to the thought police who deal with anyone guilty of thought crimes. The government, or party, is headed by Big Brother, who appears on posters everywhere with the words, "Big Brother is watching you." Make no mistake, the Internet of Things and its twin, the Internet of Senses, is just Big Brother in disguise. And there you have it. That's what we're up against, folks. The very technologies that we have in front of us to make our lives easier are the very same things that are enslaving. Lots to consider. Yes, Q University, I'll go ahead and drop the links to all the articles covered here tonight. All very good for red pilling. I'll put those out there real quick. not least. There we go. Alright, you guys should have that. All 4 of the articles covered here this evening. The Burning Platform articles. Jim Quinn does a fantastic job over at the Burning Platform blog. I read a number of his articles over the years. Usually pretty bang on the money. And of course, John Whitehead over at the Rutherford Institute has been on top of the surveillance state and the encroachments in that for a number of years. So, Golf 62's 1963 says we can expect 6 people, POTUS, and 5 justices to save humanity while we sit on our couches. The media fights for our opinions every day because we matter. It's time for us to take responsibility. Absolutely. There's a lot of things we can do. Number 1, share the word. Bypass the censorship. Get it out, social media. Actually get out and talk to folks. Commingle with neighbors, friends, whoever. Cast aside all the aspersions and BS about these lockdowns and social distancing and all that garbage. We know exactly what it's for. Let's see here. Oh, by the way, before I forget, thank you to the guys over on DLive for donations here this evening. The number of you that have donated some lemons and whatnot. Sorry, when I get on a read and whatnot, I don't get to see all those fly by, but do appreciate it. Grateful One, Madzilla Little Birdie. Appreciate it. Madladzilla. There we go. Pronounce that correctly. And you guys over on the YouTube side, still hanging with us? Yeah. So nonetheless, we got a lot of things to do. I don't think at the end of the day that we'll see much by way of the courts. Despite all the evidence, we know it's there. We see it every day. Will POTUS still get back in? Yep, I'm not worried whatsoever. I think that all of this is being exposed at a fairly substantially fast rate at this point. It's tough to keep up. Literally is. And hopefully enough of the population is awake to see what is going to happen when this thing turns. Not if, but when. And just like the articles covered here tonight, the elites, which I don't like to call them, I call them parasites because that's exactly what they are. They're societal leeches. They produce nothing, absolutely nothing. They think that they're enlightened. They're not. They're delusional, narcissists, some cases pedophiles and everything else under the sun. Their days have been numbered. Biblically, it's stated, and they've been found wanting. Pray that God has mercy on their souls. And yes, as tough as it is to do, we must forgive them of their trespasses against us. Yes, we see this. Yes, we hate it. But we also, those of us who are Christians, believe in a God of justice. Beverly Fraser says, would you read post 35? Well, let me go through the old archives here. Jump back up. Old post 35 says, if I can scale down to it quick, read it offline. There we are. Post 35 from November 1st, 2017. Yes, of course, this one. POTUS will be well insulated / protected on AF-1, Air Force One, and abroad. Specific locations classified while these operations are conducted due to the nature of the entrenchment. It is time to take back our country and make America great again. Let us salute and pray for the brave men and women in uniform who will undertake this assignment to bring forth peace, unity, and return power to the people. It is our hope that this message reaches enough people to make a meaningful impact. We cannot yet telegraph this message through normal methods for reasons I'm sure everyone here can understand. Follow the questions from the previous threads and remain calm. The primary targets are within DC and remain at the top on both sides. The spillover in the streets will be quickly shut down. Look for more false flags. Stay alert. Be vigilant. And above all, please pray. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Love is patient. Love is kind. God bless my fellow Americans. 4/10/20. And that dating back to November 1st, 2017. Here we are now 3 years past. So yes, I would encourage folks who have been on this train as long as these posts have come along to go back, reread 1 year, 2 year, potentially 3 year deltas. Are things coming to pass? Are the things that we're seeing in the media, if you're following the correct media, not the Mockingbird media, are they coming to pass? We'll have to see. Yes, they have committed treason. These guys are going to be in for a rough time. And yes, I get people, throwing shade at the Bill Barrs and the John Durhams and whatnot. Some of it has to be for optics. And at the same time, not everything is going to get run through these courts. I think UCMJ will certainly be at play for a lot of the high-level players. The low-level folks, you get the idiots in that who are down on the floors, pulling ballots out from underneath tables and everything like what we saw in Georgia. Yeah, chances are they'll probably get run through the courts when the court systems are corrected. But everybody else that's high above, the Dominion folks, everything else, we'll have to see. I'm very intrigued by Sidney Powell's RICO case she is assembling. How far, deep, and wide, and a list of characters that is going to encapsulate. I mean, we already know this thing runs straight to the top, to the handlers, to the Soros types, to the Malik types. Goes without saying. Are we going to be able to get to them? That's going to be the question. We'll have to see. Alright. I hate these Delta things. Yeah. And of course, you remember from the very early days is, reread the crumbs in that. That's part of the reason why Q Post 128 was assembled in graphic fashion to make sure everything was in order, to follow the map. And of course, the map has changed over time, but the initial map, Q128 is a good starting spot. We've reread through Q128 a number of times in the past. I've done it on various channels, have it archived on my backup channels. We also have that here on this channel where I leveraged some of that and actually wasn't able to get through the whole thing in 2 hours time, but finished it up. So yeah, go back, reread the drops, and look at how things are playing out. University LM says, I do think the Maricopa audit will be an eye-opener, maybe Georgia, but they're choosing the least likely county for fraud, but they'll find significant signature match ballots first to submit. Yeah, I don't know if it'd be Maricopa County. I think this county up in Michigan, the little bitty county up there, might be key. What the heck's, there it is, I just passed it. Antrim County. I mean, it was blatantly obvious. You only had 6 people vote for this measure, whatever it was, in this little bitty county, and all of a sudden 600 and some votes got injected. Yeah, it wasn't done by hand. No, the guy up there was threatened by the AG and threatened to be disbarred and everything else. Why? What are they so scared of? What are they so scared of? Truth being put out there, they won't be able to cover their tails fast enough. They've got nowhere to run. And I'll tell you, the day is quickly approaching when they will not be able to walk the streets. So, that is going to do it for this evening's Fireside. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We will be back here tomorrow for our Wednesday lineup at our regularly scheduled time. Do want to encourage you guys to check back in then as well. We'll be on all the platforms as usual. And so, that being said, we will catch you guys tomorrow. Take care. God bless everybody.